How do you start editing your projects?
Does every video need to tell a story?
How am I going to figure out what my rate is?
If I'm a new editor, how do I find my first client?
How much should I charge for a 10-minute video?
Those questions are thrown around a lot, so let's answer them. We talk about the practicalities of editing.
Project presets, that is a huge thing that saves me about 30 to 40 minutes every time I do an edit.
I get a lot of questions of how much should I charge for a 10-minute video? That is the wrong question to ask, as well as some of our philosophies about editing as a career. There's 10 stairs to get to a creator like Logan, and I think the temptation to try and jump those steps is the mistake.
If you're an editor and you're like, I need to get out of this catch-22, you can validate yourself by giving yourself a job.
And most importantly, everything we discuss is actionable. Story is simply the wrong word. Story simply means change.
We asked you guys some questions on our social media. How to work with clients, how to make clients' lives easier. How, if you're a brand new editor, are you gonna find those first clients? And specifically for you, Hayden, how are you gonna find YouTube clients? There's so many YouTubers out there that can't find editors and so many editors out there that can't find YouTubers. How can we make that connection easier?
I mean, there's two things going on here. One, you should already have your own experience in making content and knowing that you can provide that value to a creator. If you don't have any experience and then you offer your editing services to a creator, well, bottom line, you don't have the experience. And so what that means is you have to learn to make that content yourself first. And then that gives yourself something to showcase to them. But that is definitely still a hard thing. How do you even get their attention? I think I have to admit, I'm ever so slightly out of the loop of that because I've had the privilege of, because of my experience, I've got a very good, high valuable word of mouth. And so I can able to kind of hop between clients. And so for me, I'm out working, trying to understand what creators are who do not have that privilege. What have they got to work? How can they get people's attention when you don't have that privilege?
It was so fascinating on our first episode where you told your story of how you met Logan and how you actually made contact with him. Do you think that creators and editors can come together in that same way still today? Or do you think there's a better way to do it?
Well, I don't recommend everybody to tell their boss to go fuck himself, as that's what you're suggesting. That is an anecdote. That is what I was able to do that got me that job with Logan.
Do you think that's really what it was? Do you think it's that you had that much guts, that's why he wanted you? Or do you think it was actually your editing work that stood about?
That statement of telling the boss to go fuck himself, that was what got his attention. But then I got the job because I was able to deliver the quality. A lot of that was because of my experiences leading up to that point. It's not like I started working with Logan and that was the first time I ever touched editing software. I'd already been doing it for over time for like 8 to 10 years at that point. Before I worked with Logan, I did work with a Facebook video company that already had some really great experiences on how to learn to cut fast. I learned how to do really good vibes and tone because before then I worked for a YouTube channel called What's Good London. But then also before that was also all of my experiences at university. I also worked on another YouTube series called Becoming YouTube, which was another docu-series documenting YouTube. So before that, I worked with other creators who were all kind of friends making some funny sketches. All of that experience of me literally just this pull, that experience meant that when I then became connected to Logan, I was able to provide the value straight away.
Wow.
That took a long time to get there. Majority of those things that I was doing, especially at the Facebook video company, was not what I wanted to do, but those day-by-day experiences gave me the skills that when I then found the job that I did want to do, I went, all right, I'm going to hang around for this one.
There's so many editors that are trying to go straight to Logan Paul.
Yeah.
When that's not the case. That's not what you should be doing.
Let's just say there's 10 stairs you got to get to a creator like Logan or some of the other large creators. And I think the temptation to try and jump those steps is the mistake. The patience to be able to take this step, take the next step, take the next step, take the next step, to then organically and naturally get that work. I now have the privilege of being able to contact majority of creators and say, hey, can I edit a video for you? Right. But it was because I took those steps to get to that point rather than trying to jump the stairs.
The thing that is so fascinating to me is that our starts are very similar. So for me, I didn't know how to make a music video. So I went and found some friends of mine and borrowed a friend's camera and just went and made a music video. And you, with your friends, you were like, shoot, we want to make YouTube videos, so we're just going to go make them straight away. Like, nobody needs to give us permission. So if you're an editor and you're like, I need to get out of this catch-22 where I know I can edit and I know I have the skills, but a YouTuber hasn't noticed me, go and start making your own content. because that's going to really set you apart from the rest of the pack, because you also are showing that you're passionate about filmmaking and what you do. And so nobody's forcing you to go make content on your own. But if you're already doing that, that becomes way more attractive to somebody who's looking for an editor.
10 years ago, I think we both fell into this paradox where to get a job, you need experience.
Yep.
But to get experience, you need a job.
Right.
And that was a massive paradox I think we had. Do you think that's still the case today?
You can validate yourself by giving yourself a job, essentially.
Yeah.
You can hire yourself out as an editor for your own content. And that is a resume item that you can put on it.
The opportunity to really get the skills is to work with yourself. And then one day you might get a cold email or a cold message or a cold DM saying, hey, I really like your stuff. Do you want to work together? Let the universe give it to you by building your own skills.
I don't even want to speak after that. That was beautiful, Hayden. So say you pass the test now, you have a client, and the channel has 1 million subscribers. And so now you're negotiating with the team and you're trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to charge them per video? How am I going to figure out what my rate is? How would you help and counsel that editor that's going through that?
I think the follow-up with that is I get a lot of questions of people asking, how much should I charge for a 10-minute video? That is the wrong question to ask. The reason why is because it could be a 10-minute video, but it could be 60 hours of footage. It could be 2 hours of footage. It could be 5 hours. It could be 100 hours. And depending on how long the project's going to be for you to get it done is where you gauge that type of expectation. With Logan, I made a 2.5-minute video. It was a trailer for his 99 Originals series, but that took us 3.5 months to make that trailer because it was also 60 hours of footage. Does that mean I charge for 2.5 minutes? No. That means I'll be getting 1 cent a day. And so that's the wrong way to gauge how long, because what you really should be asking is, how long am I going to be on this project for? And so I would say day rates is probably the best way that you can gauge that. And also the expectations of the client, they also need to understand this is going to take a week. This is going to take 2 weeks. It's going to take 5 weeks. But yeah, it's a 10-minute video, but that also has a huge variation on it as well. There are 3 things that I think you need to ask to then help understand your value. 1 is your experience. Have you worked for a year? That could potentially indicate a relatively low amount. Have you worked for 10 years? That can indicate a large amount because you have the experience. And then this is slightly related to experience, but also the difficulty. A 10-minute video could just be someone sitting in their car and having a chat, or in an anecdotal case, there could be 30 different cameras and all of these big creators are hiding in a stadium playing hide and seek. That's incredibly difficult to find that story and then get that narrative across. And so that took me well over a month to create that one. Experience, difficulty, and length is how you value yourself.
And I think the difficult thing is everybody wants a number, and that number is so difficult to come by because there's so many variables, so many levers that control what that number is for that day rate or for that hourly rate. It really has to come down to what makes sense for you as well.
Yeah.
What makes sense for you and what makes sense for the client. So depending on all those things, so many different numbers could be thrown out and the range is insane.
Yes. But those 3 questions can help you gauge what that number would be.
What is your editing flow and routine? So you get the footage. What do you do next?
I think one of the first rules for me is context. And so before I even do anything, I like to go through the entire footage that exists, and so I fully know what footage I'm working with. It's dangerous to assume you have X shot, or it's dangerous to assume you have X, Y of something else without actually knowing if you do have that. And so for me, before I do anything, I want to know what I'm working with. With that though, I then start cutting out all the bits and bobs that I know will not make it in the edit, such as setting up the camera, maybe some false starts. I cut all of that bit out.
Do you do that at the same time?
I do that at the same time.
Going through the footage.
So context, and then removing everything I know for a fact I will not use.
I've heard to not do that, actually.
Oh,
The
really?
way that I was trained in film school, they say go through everything and then duplicate your sequence and then do that.
Oh, I've portrayed everything then.
Well, the thing is, I'm tempted to do what you do all the time because it's way more efficient time-wise.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say that.
For me, it's got that efficiency, and I think due to with the nature of my work, with it being YouTube, the deadline is much tighter, and so you kind of need to multitask a little bit. But then with that context, I now have an opportunity to figure out what the story is. And so before I even do anything, such as any of the fun editing, I would say it's tempted to do the fun editing straight away. But my logic is you need to earn the right to do the fun editing. And so you got to do the busy work first. For me, it's once I now know the context and probably have a good indicator of what the story is, for me, it would then be finding that potential structure first. It might mean moving some scenes around, putting something here, maybe trying out over here, and then finding that story. And then once I now know what the tone and feel of that is when I then start doing all of the fun stuff.
Where in your order of operations does music fall?
Quite late. Music is one of the first ways for you to then start finding the tone and the feel.
Right.
And then you throw that underneath any footage. There you go. You got your tone and feel. And therefore you then start influencing your cuts in that direction. Whereas that's the wrong way around. I would say you need to do your best to find the tone and the feel without the use of music. And then once you've identified how the footage feels, that can then be your information to help find the right track.
Does your order of operations change if it was like a normal YouTube video versus a documentary versus a music video?
Well, if it's a music video, I would assume you should put the track in first.
That is true.
I also do think for YouTube and documentary, I'm beginning to attribute both of those in the same category now. And so for me, it is, can I achieve the tone and story and emotions first before I put in music?
Yeah.
And so that's what I try to get. And then, as I said, once I've achieved that, then I can identify what emotion this is and then find that track underneath. You got to be able to tell your story without music being the crutch.
You are doing all of this in a sequence where you're going through all the footage, cutting out the bits you don't need. Do you then create a new sequence that's fresh, or do you just keep trimming it down? Like, what do you do for the final edit?
It's funny because I see a lot of people making that exact mistake. They do what they need to do, and then they keep doing the next step in the same edit.
Yeah.
But what if you make a big mistake and you want to go back? You don't want to be hitting Control Z 1,000 times. And so for me, my big rule is whenever a big change is going to happen, or a big workflow or a big choice in the edit is going to happen, I duplicate that.
Say it again for the people in the back.
I duplicate whenever I'm going to make a big change.
I can't tell you how many times that's gotten me out of a huge, big, bad situation.
All editing is experimenting. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? Over and over and over and over and over again, until one day you're so sick of it that you have to hit publish. There could be a time when you raise a question and say, what happens if I do this? You try it, realize it's garbage, and so you go back.
Yep.
But if you didn't preserve your prior cut, you're screwed.
You can only go back so many times.
Or you have to do Control Z for 2 hours.
Ain't nobody want to do that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for
that. This is what's interesting because I haven't particularly had that traditional training, I've built that habit over time without anyone really telling me what it is. And so I love the fact that there is a standard that I've adopted and organically picked up, but it's slightly unorthodox as well. So what is the actual way of structuring your workflow?
Well, like you said, I don't think there's an actual way. I think lots of people can do it differently. I have personal different order of operations, different workflows for whatever genre it is. So for a music video, it's going to be different. From a YouTube video, from even a documentary, it's going to be different. But I think the overall theme between all of the workflows is audio comes first and then visuals.
I don't think I understand. What do you mean by audio first?
Generally, I start with voiceover or dialogue first. So that's how I figure out what the pacing is. That's how I figure out what the tone is, like you said. What is happening in the scene, and then how do we hit that story point and then get to the next scene? That's all usually told primarily through audio when it comes to documentary or YouTube videos. But primarily story is told through audio, so that's what I focus on first. And then after that, I'll start laying in the visuals and the music kind of at the same time. That'll help you really stop getting distracted from all those bells and whistles. Like, start doing the color grading first. Like, we don't worry about it. Just worry about what people are saying and how that's influencing the story. Then move on from there once that story is locked and feels really good. The
most interesting epiphany there is you've mentioned audio being a priority, audio being where the story really, really is told. And I think that's something for me, I've definitely had that instinct about. Like, at the back of my mind, of course, like, you got to make sure the story is told audibly. That's where you do find your story structure. And so you've just pointed out something that I feel like I've been instinctually doing and not realizing until now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, you're right. Because for me, it is, let's just say, X-Creator sends me their vlog of the day. Of course, I'm cutting for audio. Of course, I'm cutting for dialogue. I never realized that was the priority until now.
Yeah. It's even my editor teacher in film school would have us turn off the videos track. So we were literally only listening. And so that's something that I would really recommend. If you find yourself getting distracted pretty easily, literally turn off the video track and just make your entire edit audio only. This is what the story is. And now how can I make the story better with visuals and how can I emotionally impact you more with sound, with music, with visuals, sound effects, things like that.
It's important, I would say, with our web media audience to understand that structure and discipline, because there is a high and pretty much understandable risk that people will be listening to your content rather than watching. They might put it on their phone, put it down and continue filling up dishwasher or doing the dishes or something like that. And so you need to ensure that they can still follow the story while they're listening. And so maybe to an extent, that is the priority. Before you do the visual stuff, you got to make sure that I can, without watching, understand your video. So that's actually really good discipline. Like, can you edit your content without visuals first so to ensure that everything's clear?
So good. So good. I love that.
That is like the workflow, like how to ensure that you can still have a decent understanding of what you're doing. But editing is an incredibly tedious and long process. What steps do you do to ensure that you maintain efficiency?
Efficiency is the name of the game, y'all. It's really, really important. It's the difference between, especially if you're getting paid at a flat rate, it's the difference between your hourly rate being $20 an hour or $50 an hour. I think the obvious thing is keyboard shortcuts. Like, that's going to make things fly so much. If you have to click something, go to a drop-down menu, click that thing, that is so much longer than just pressing a button. So if you are like, man, I hate keyboard shortcuts, I have to learn them, and it just takes me longer to actually do keyboard shortcuts when I know where it is in the software that I'm using, guys, trust me, it is so important to learn the discipline of shortcuts and apply them.
Yeah, if you're having to do 4 to 5 clicks to get to it, that can be 3 to 4 seconds, or maybe even 5 to 6 seconds. And then you're going to do it again, and you're going to do it again, and you're going to do it again and again and again and again. And that compounds up to a minute, compounds up to 2 minutes, compounds up to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15s. 3 hours you've lost, or maybe even 4 hours you lost because you simply didn't know the 1 second keyboard shortcut.
Yeah.
The best editors I've ever seen are ones who don't even use the mouse.
They look like a freaking coder, just...
You know, when you see those hacker scenes in movies, that's cliche. I bet that's based off an editor.
Yeah,
That's what it
exactly.
is. That's how the filmmakers get that reference.
Dude, for real, it's the best editor that you've seen. Another thing that really comes to mind is having project presets and templates. That is a huge, huge thing that saves me about 30 to 40 minutes every time I do an edit, because I can just copy and paste my Finder folders, and it has all of the things that I may need. It has projects, it has folders for where to put my assets. And also when I open up that project that's in that preset, it will also have all of my bins, all of my assets that I use for every single video. That's really common. And that saves me so much time throughout the edit because I know exactly where everything is and I can go click it, find it, and I'm done just instantly.
That's with Premiere. I do the exact same thing with my use Final Cut, where I have a project library that has everything that I routinely use on a consistent basis. So if there's a great asset that I made in one video and I know I'm going to use it again, I will potentially copy that project or copy those assets, that data, paste it into that library, and then great. So, all right, I need to use that subtitle preset again. I'll throw that in. Oh, this is a leitmotif track I use in a lot of Logan's content. It's in that library. Oh, is this animation circle graphic that I need to use again? Well, I already have it saved in this library. Here it is. Drag it into the other library, and I could just keep on going.
Boom.
Instead of me having to recreate it every single time. The amount of people I do see who do
Right.
recreate the same graphic every single time, or having to scramble and opening up an old project that they did 3 months ago, like, oh, I know I used a graphic then, and trying to find it and then copy paste it. You may as well have made the graphic from the ground up again anyway. Okay, I'm also a victim of that. Sometimes I don't save some presets.
Yeah, of course.
Tools or things that you create that you know you will be using on a consistent basis, put that in a special place that's easily accessible.
And I also do, this is a shameless plug, but I do have a project template if you use Premiere. This is the project template that I use, so I just give it away for free for anybody who needs it. And so you can go ahead and grab that. But if you can learn to be efficient, you can save yourself some time, you can save your clients some time. It's just all around a better scenario. So
Exactly.
I think also just not getting distracted while you're editing and being able to focus in is a huge efficiency thing.
If you're the one who delivers fast, the person that you work with would like to hire you again, because that creates a huge element of trust. If you're able to hit before the deadline, that's huge. If you're the one who always pushes the deadline, it always delivers past that deadline, you might produce something incredible, but over time that removes that trust, and they don't want to work with you because, well, you're not simply respecting the deadlines.
Right.
But then also on top of that, sometimes the person you work with should also give you a realistic deadline as well. It's a two-way street there.
Learn to be efficient.
Learn to be efficient. Be efficient.
Be efficient.
Yeah, it was. See what I did
Be
there?
efficient.
That was a more efficient sentence. Not learn to be efficient. Be efficient.
Oh, come on, Hayden, you're so good.
So this was the question that I was actually the most excited about because us as creators, we're really, really starting to learn the actual value of storytelling. Does every video need to tell a story? For example, how do you tell a story in a reaction video or a tutorial? I get that question a lot because I think people are trying to find massive hero's journey character arcs in a reaction video or a hero's journey character arcs in a tutorial. And so they're trying to have those massive scale ideas in what would be probably a basic, very simple concept. The reason why I think that's a mistake is because they're seeing story as a massive scale thing. When story is simply the wrong word, I think story simply means change. If you're doing a tutorial, it means I have a question, here is the answer, and that's a change. And so there's your story. If it's a reaction video, it can be something as simple as the try not to laugh concept. Here is me trying to not laugh. At the end, I laugh. There's your change. That's your story. Simply because comes down to that very, very simple process of how to ideate your video. Is the idea going to give a small change?
Yeah.
And if you do that, that's your story.
I think it's even a change in the audience too, and the way that they are viewing it.
Yeah.
And so for me, since I do a lot of reaction and breakdown content on my channel, the story is imbued because I am watching a story unfold. Generally, usually I do music videos, and all music videos have a story whether they know it or not. And so I like to talk about what that story is. And in doing so, I'm creating a new story by talking about the story. Before we knew X about editing, and now after we're done with the video, we know Y about editing. And it's just and we're all learning together, and that is a story in and of itself.
This podcast, there is a change. People have raised questions. We've answered them. You now have new information. There's your change. And so this podcast has had a story. That is a simple idea of what story is. You don't need to have a massive character arc. If you can inform and make a change, that's your story.
Absolutely.
Hey,
That just made me excited. I had to do a little dance after that one.